Welcome back. We'll be switching our focus now to our neighbors out in the Limpopo River. US President Donald Trump has once again shaken the global economy, this time with a sweeping tariff regime that imposes a minimum of 10% tax on all imports and a much steeper rates as high as 50% on goods from countries he accuses of unfair trade practices. The White House says there's reciprocal tariffs are designed to eliminate America's trade deficits and to protect domestic jobs. But I think critics the world over are arguing they are arbitrary, punitive, and risk igniting a full blown global trade war. Zimbabwe has found itself caught in this crossfire. The country faces an 18% tariff on its exports to the US, a blow to its already fragile economy. But in a rather surprising turn of events, a surprising move, the president of Zimbabwe, Emerson Mnangagwa, has responded by lifting tariffs on U.S. goods, saying the gesture is meant to build goodwill with the Trump administration. Is this a smart diplomacy or a somewhat white flag raising surrender? And what does it say about African urgency in a world where protectionism is back in fashion? And joining us now is Zimbabwean political analyst and international affairs commentator Gideon Chitanga. Gideon, thank you so much for joining us. Really, really appreciate you giving us your time, and welcome to Salam Media.
Thank you. Good morning.
I think we can kickstart the conversation here. First, your reaction to President Mnangagwa's decision to scrap tariffs on U.S. imports, especially in light of that aggressive new global tariff policy, a rather unprecedented move from President Mnangagwa.
Yes, I think that there is desperation in Harare, to at least find ways of smoothing relations with Washington. This is not an isolated event. There is a couple of efforts or initiatives or diplomatic tactics which may not necessarily be useful at this juncture, but that's where Harare is desperation. They want to at least find a way of smoothing relations with Washington. In the previous month, I think we spoke about efforts being done by the Mnangagwa government to try and foster good relations with the current Israel government. And that is part of the equation to try and at least work out some kind of outreach to Washington to say we are willing to at least do your bidding or work closely with you. Unfortunately, I do not think that these efforts are informed by objective interests, either Zimbabwean or African. To me, it seems that they are solely just regime interests that are partly about security and economic interests for the elites and not necessarily the interests of Zimbabwe or the continent. And I say so because, like you inferred in your introduction, the first thing is there isn't much trade between Zimbabwe and the US. But even with that little trade, you would be thinking that Zimbabwe would need to or focus on securing its economic interests and getting a fair share, at least from the trade that is happening. The second thing is there are quite a number of protocols that seek to address the question of tariffs within the SADC. And under the current circumstances, one would have thought that Mnangagwa, who is the chairperson of the SADC, would probably be thinking about initiating some kind of conversation with SADC leaders to say, this is where we are. We have been hit with tariffs. How do we at least come together and maybe try to go for a collective response that protects our regional interests and then craft national responses that are aligned to the regional response. And I think the last point would relate to those countries that have been traditionally bigger partners for Zimbabwe, particularly after Zimbabwe was thrown under the bus with sanctions since 2002 by the European Union and the USA. There are countries which at least kept Zimbabwe moving. African countries shared their solidarity and stood with Zimbabwe, which is betraying every other sense of diplomatic norms by just jumping north to the south. Then there are countries like China who actually pumped the resources into Zimbabwe and are now the dominant players in the Zimbabwean economy. So if you are saying we are offering zero tariffs to the US, what are you going to do with these countries which have maintained trade relations with you when things were really tough?
I think you make a really, really important point there. I want to, take a quick break, but when we come back, I want to touch a bit on, the reality on the ground in Zimbabwe. We know that, there's a currency crisis. Local industries are struggling. And I want to touch on the fact that can the country afford this kind of one-sided trade relationship? And ultimately, what will it mean for the people on the ground in Zimbabwe, those that own businesses and just consumers in generally? But we'll touch on that after the short break.
Rejuvenating media day by day. This is Salam Media.
It's a wonder how kids get anything done these days. With all the distractions, when do they even get time to study? As a mother, all I can really do is make sure they have all they need to perform at their best. That's why I choose to include Sunfoil, triple refined pure sunflower oil with every meal I make. Naturally cholesterol-free and approved by the Heart and Stroke Foundation as part of a balanced eating plan. So whether I'm cooking, frying, or baking, I know every dish will be a wholesome one. Sunfoil, now we're cooking.
They say breakfast is the most important meal of the day, yet many children go to school hungry because of poverty. Penny Appeal South Africa's Breakfast Club aims to get a warm, hearty meal to underprivileged children so they can spend their day prospering in their schoolwork. Help feed a needy learner for only 5 Rand a day, or 150 Rand a month. Or visit our website www.pennyappeal.org.za or call 031 1100 573 to find out how you can donate. Penny Appeal South Africa. Small change, big difference.
Discover the Africa of your dreams and surround yourself with her spectacular beauty. Relax beneath her serene sunsets and explore wildlife at its natural best. It's where the pride of Africa comes together. The Kwantu Private Game Reserve. Get to know the Big Five or cruise on an elephant safari game drive. Interact with lion and tiger cubs and enjoy world-class halal cuisine while we pamper you during your 5-star stay. Indulge in the true African experience. For reservations, call now on 042-203-1400 or visit kwantu.co.za. The Kwantu Private Game Reserve, the place of gathering.
Abu Hurairah narrated that he heard the Prophet Muhammad, may the peace and blessings of Allah be upon him, say, "In black seed there is a healing for every disease except death." This Ramadan, experience the health benefits of this ancient blessed seed by using the Tib Black Seed range. Black seed assists the body to boost immunity, regulate blood sugar levels, reduce inflammation, and act as a potent antioxidant. Experience a holistic approach to health by introducing the Tib Black Seed range into your Ramadan routine. Available in capsules, pure cold-pressed oil, and a vapor rub. Trust Tib Health Sciences for quality black seed products. For more information, visit blackseed.co.za. Available at leading pharmacies.
Valley's Motor Spares. We supply motor spares and accessories for all makes and models of motor cars, LDVs, buckies, trucks, and earth-moving equipment. We deliver on time, every time. Please contact us via WhatsApp on 014-592-0925 or call 014-592-0925 or visit 28 Zenderling Street, Rustenburg. Remember the name, Valley's Motor Spares.
Connect and stay ahead with Salam Media. This is Salam Media, coming to you live from South Africa.
Welcome back. You're still tuned in to News and Views with myself, Salailo Makwidir, and we're still having a really, really interesting conversation with Zimbabwean political analyst and international relations expert Gideon Chitanga. We're talking about, Zimbabwe. As I mentioned before, while countries across the world are still trying to figure out how they're going to, manage, contain, react to U.S. President Donald Trump's shake-up of the global economy with those sweeping tariffs that he has imposed on, countries that he deemed or accuses of unfair trade practices with the U.S. Well, Zimbabwe, who are, victims themselves of this new tariff hike imposed by the United States of America, facing an 18% tariff on its exports to the U.S. Well, they've decided, the president of Zimbabwe has decided that they'll be lifting tariffs on U.S. goods and saying this gesture is meant to build goodwill with the Trump administration. And Gideon, before we went on that break, I wanted to maybe just explore a bit the lived realities on the ground. I think we all know how bad things are in Zimbabwe. But if you can just, I think, explore that theme a bit more and just how much of an impact will this zero tariff on U.S. goods have on Zimbabweans that who are already, trying to find a way in an already fragile economy. Just unpack that for us a bit.
I don't think that this zero tariff gesture will have any serious transformative impact on the economy. There are things that Zimbabwe should address, and these things are known. If anything, the zero tariff just will probably help like the 1% of the richest 1% in Zimbabwe to access whatever goods they want to buy in the US using money that is accumulated from relations with the state. Every day today, if you follow the media in Zimbabwe, you see scandalous exposés of allegations of corruption that goes to the top level. And that is problematic. Part of it implicates some of the key business elites who are flashing cash in US dollars when the economy is reeling under the shortage of forex to buy basics like medical supplies, like fuel. Ordinary people cannot access their money from banks either in the national currency or in US dollars. The unemployment is probably 90% in Zimbabwe. There are just no jobs. The manufacturing is collapsed. Zimbabwe has been struggling to fix its financial and monetary policy. I think for the past decade, there has not been a clear solution. Now the government is taxing everybody, including the people who sell in the streets, as a way of at least raising money to run government activities. So it's a desperate situation in Zimbabwe. Education is not well funded. Teachers don't earn so much. Schools do not have books. Infrastructure collapse. Same for health. People struggle for food, and in the mining sectors, where lithium and other resources are extracted, the conditions in the mines are so desperately dangerous for those who work there, either in formal or in formal settings or in informal settings. And all those resources are exported out of the country, but very little comes to the fiscus. So I really think that where President Mnangagwa is sitting, he should be thinking about where his legacy would be in terms of resolving the socio-economic issues, but also peacefully resetting the political situation in Zimbabwe. Mugabe was removed through a coup in 27 after a whole lost decade that was characterized by political violence because he was resisting the opposition. At this moment, there is an internal war within ZANU-PF, partly because President Mnangagwa or his supporters he previously indicated that he should continue until 2030 beyond his second term of office, but also he's old. He's probably 86 years old. And surely we have a country that requires, I think, the level of energy, the adrenaline that you spoke with, coming from a younger generation of leaders who are committed to clean government, interested in a very true sense to fighting corruption and recreating the economy, allowing the productive sectors to flourish so that Zimbabwe can create jobs from its mines, from agriculture, from manufacturing. If you don't produce anything, you don't have an economy. And Zimbabwe does not produce anything. So now if we are not buying within the continent or the sub-region, the rich are going to be buying the most expensive things they need from the US. It's crazy. I think it's irresponsible for the government to be rushing to placate President Trump at this stage instead of really addressing urgent problems that are known by everyone in the country and alienating countries in the sub-region and in Africa which have supported Zimbabwe through thick and thin, including during the liberation struggle. And
sorry to jump in. I wanted to touch on that after, because Zimbabwe currently chairs SADC, I just wanted to understand, from your point of view, what does this, unilateral gesture mean for regional solidarity, especially when other SADC countries like Lesotho, who are almost, bearing a big brunt of these tariff hikes, South Africa also being a new target of the US, and Zambia also being targeted. What does this gesture mean for regional solidarity, especially for the fact that Zimbabwe is currently the chair of the bloc?
The position that Zimbabwe is taking is desperate and opportunistic. So, and I don't think, the President Mnangagwa is the chairperson of SADC. Thing would have been to reach out to other countries, and surely every country is free to explore their own response. But as the chairperson of the SADC, I think the right thing should have been to explore a regional response or to try and work out national responses that are framed or aligned very closely to what would be a regional response. That's the first thing. The second thing is SADC has a history of solidarity, and Zimbabwe is a major benefactor of that. It is now at this point Zimbabwe that is desperately behaving in a very opportunistic way and betraying those historical norms and values that we know from the liberation struggle to the 2000s. Zimbabwe, when it was in a very bad space, the world imposing sanctions against the region with Zimbabwe. I mean the SADC region. The African Union stood with Zimbabwe. Now Zimbabwe under Mnangagwa is really becoming very opportunistic, no values, and we can say it's interests which they are pursuing, but they are not necessarily, I think, national interests. I think these are elite interests, the calculation that the rich people can benefit from Zimbabwe. But that as it may, we are not a big economy. I don't know if the US stands to benefit that much from whatever can come from Zimbabwe in strict economic terms. Yes, President Mnangagwa is probably trying to play this game of placating Donald Trump, thinking that Zimbabwe can maybe get some concessions, but that's not certain. And even at this point, we have not really seen any enthusiastic response from Washington. So the risk is he might be betraying his people and his peers in the region and in the continent without really getting much benefit from Washington, and therefore taking some self-defeating desperate measures.
And I think, this is also, I think, just putting a stamp of approval on Trump's rhetoric, which he has numerous times has said and painted African countries as cheaters or freeloaders of the USA. And I think it almost risks or reinforces a narrative of weakness and dependence. But Gideon, we're going to leave it on that note. Thank you so much for chatting to us. Always a pleasure, and looking forward to chatting to you in the not so distant future again.
Thank you.
There you go. That was Zimbabwean political analyst and international relations expert Gideon Chitanga. And I think he encapsulated so well. Trump's rhetoric has painted African countries as, we all know the word that I won't use on air, as whole. He called African countries literally nothingness. He said we're cheaters and freeloaders of the United States of America. We're weak. There's nothing coming out of Africa that is of interest to the United States. And I think that reinforces this move by Zimbabwean President Emmerson Mnangagwa, almost reinforces that narrative, a narrative of weakness, a narrative of dependence. And the question would be, Zimbabwe is the current chair of SADC, and embarking on this unilateral gesture. What does it mean for regional solidarity? As you heard from Gideon there, SADC has almost had, one blanket approach on how they go about a lot of issues. There's been a whole lot of solidarity within the region. It's been a very prosperous, very supportive bloc compared to other economic blocs on the continent. The chair of this bloc decides, well, we're not going to discuss anything. All of us are affected. And at this point, is every man for himself. And, well, I'm picking to go the other side. I'm not looking for alternative markets like everyone else has been saying. I'm not looking to maybe look to the East probably as new trading partners. We're going to rather, I don't know, be ice boys for the United States of America, show weakness and dependency, even to an administration that doesn't care, to be honest, about Africa and what Africa has to offer and what Africa is to the world. So it's going to be interesting how the rest of the continent responds, because it almost feels like Zimbabwe won't be the only ones. But we'll wait and see. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we'll be speaking to Palestinian photojournalist Hamza Shalan.